Bom dia a todos, bom dia a todas. Prazer tê-los e tê-las conosco nesta manhã aqui em São Paulo. I will turn to English. Eu vou falar inglês a partir de agora, para que todos os que estão aqui conosco possam me entender. It's a great pleasure to have you all here today with us. Thank you all the participants, and thank you, Ambassador Beatriz, for making the time for this event. I'll be brief because we have time constraints here. The title of the seminar is self-explanatory. I mean, everybody is aware of the big challenge we have ahead to decarbonize the world. And the question here is how to finance the projects that will make it possible. And of course, we are lagging behind. We have to speed up the pace, and we have to muster up all the actors and resources that we can to meet the targets that we need to avoid climate change, to take a very dangerous course. We have 3 participants with us today. I'll be brief in introducing them. I have to present a abridged version of the rich and long biographies. I'll start with Juan Antonio Kettner, who is the chief of the Connectivity Markets and Finance Division of the Inter-American Development Bank. Juan Antonio has a long experience in the financial markets, both in multilateral organizations and in the private sector. He has a PhD in financial economics from the University of Minnesota. We have also with us here today Cesar Sanchez, who is the head of the sustainability at B3, the Brazilian Stock Exchange. He is an engineer. He has a PhD from the University of São Paulo in engineer and a master's in sustainability in economics from the University of Aberdeen, Scotland. Last but not the least, we have also Paula Redondo Pereira, who is currently the head of regulatory affairs at the Luxembourg Stock Exchange. She has joined the Luxembourg Stock Exchange 5 years ago. Paula received her law degree from the University of Nova Lisboa, her LLM in International Business and Economic Law from Georgetown University, and her master's in European Affairs from the Universidade Católica Portuguesa. So thank you so much for making the time to be here with us today. In a moment, I will turn the floor to Beatriz Kirsch, who is the Luxembourg ambassador to Brazil. But before I do that, let me call your attention to the companies that sponsor the annual program of seminars of the Fundação Fernando Henrique Cardoso. Included is one today. This is a special event in the sense that it's done in partnership with B3 and the Luxembourg Stock Exchange, as you can see on the top of the page. All the other companies' trademarks is shown here. I would like to thank each and every one of them. So having said that, I'll hand it over to you, Beatriz, for your introductory remarks before we start the panel. The floor is yours, Beatriz.
Thank you, Sergio. I hope you can hear me. I'm not so good with the technology. Yes, my name is Beatriz Kirsch. I'm ambassador of the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg to Brazil. I've been here for about 3 months now. And why am I making the opening remarks here, you might wonder? Well, that's because I have inherited the job from my predecessor, Ambassador Carlo Krieger, who has opened up the Luxembourg embassy in Brazil. And he was very active in promoting links between Brazil and Luxembourg on anything concerning green finance. So my first thanks go to him for starting this project quite a while ago. My thanks go to the Fundação Fernando Henrique Cardoso, to Sergio Fausto and his team for being interested in the topic and for staying, on the ball all these months, and of course to the Luxembourg Stock Exchange, most particularly to Paula Redondo Pereira for making all this happen. And so thanks to all of them. And if I forgot anybody in particular, please excuse me. I don't want to waste more of your time, and I will straight go into my opening remarks. So, with the floods and the forest fires, which we have felt directly more and more often lately around the world, governments and people now have concrete proof right on their doorstep, even in Luxembourg, that climate change is real and it must be stopped. There is nothing left to deny. Now it is a matter of facing the truth and acting for the benefit of all living beings on the planet. Finance plays an essential role in this. Luxembourg has been constantly expanding its toolbox of products and services designed to promote investment into green and sustainable projects and to help bring sustainable finance into mainstream. The Grand Duchy of Luxembourg is fully committed to the goal of transforming itself and assisting other markets in their transition to a sustainable global economy. To this end, Luxembourg has established a coherent climate finance strategy with the dual objectives of contributing in a meaningful way to the international fight against climate change and cementing Luxembourg's role as an international center for climate change. Some of the initiatives include, first, the Luxembourg Sustainable Finance Initiative, a non-profit association that designs and implements the sustainable finance strategy for the Luxembourg Financial Center. Two, the European Investment Bank Climate Finance Platform, a joint initiative aiming to mobilize investment for climate-related projects by combining a stop-loss guarantee with technical assistance. Third, the International Climate Finance Accelerator, a public-private partnership that provides financial and operational support to fund managers launching innovative climate action funds. Fourth, the Amundi Planet Emerging Green One Fund, a joint venture with the International Finance Corporation, which invests in green bonds issued by banks in developing countries. And of course, last but not least, the Luxembourg Green Exchange, the first global platform dedicated to green, socially responsible and sustainable securities. Finance needs to be part of the solution to our global challenge. If we are to reach the global goals and solve the climate crisis, massive amounts of capital will be needed. Exchanges as the Luxembourg Green Exchange and the Brazilian B3, along with multi-development banks as the Inter-American Development Bank, all three present today at this webinar, have a crucial role to play in this context. Luxembourg, Brazil, international actors, we should all work together across borders to accelerate the transition to a low carbon and more inclusive economy. I was very quick. I don't want to abuse your time. So I hope we have a very fruitful webinar conference today, and I say obrigada. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Beatriz. Thank you for your presence and thank you for your support. Now, as we have previously established, Juan Antonio starts, then paves the way for Cesar, and Paula would crown the first round of the presentations. Juan Antonio, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. Good morning to you all. And I thank you for not only for inviting me, but mostly for organizing this type of event, which I think hits on one of the most important topics that we are facing as humanity, not only Latin America or Brazil or US, but as human race, the fact that we have to really get this business done before the business do us. So we think that at this point, there is a general agreement, as Ambassador Beatriz just mentioned, that everybody agrees that there is this problem and that problem needs to be faced. And through a series of conferences and places in which most countries agree, they have reached the conclusion that in order to preserve our Earth, we need to have a path to net zero by 2050. This is the most important conclusion that we have reached. Now, once we have agreed that this is something that needs to be done, the next question is, how do we go about doing it? And the first thing that we have to do is to plot, to list, to set a strategy of investments that need to be done for the human race to accomplish this fit. And once you have done that, the next thing you have to do is to say, and how much does it cost? And that's where the problem really is, because it costs a lot of money. It costs more or less, take $1 billion or two, $125 trillion. That is 125,000 millions of US dollars. That's a lot of money. And that is the minimum money that is required to accomplish our goal of 2050. So the IDB, the Inter-American Development Bank, and the division that I have the honor to lead, our main focus is to find ways to help countries. Our countries are in the Latin American and the Caribbean region, to help countries to finance this 125 trillion. The question is, though, that in all the countries, there is not enough public money to do it. There is no way the public sector will be able to come up with that kind of money. Therefore, after doing a lot of thinking, the only alternative that we've got is to use the public money, not so much to finance the path towards 2050, but to use it to make sure that the private sector will come in and help finance. Going to our region, the region of Latin America and the Caribbean, basically we are responsible for 10% of the global greenhouse emissions. And unfortunately, Brazil and Mexico are the largest contributors to that 10%, because they are largest countries, but also because of the type of economic activities that they are they're engaged with. And the region in as all, it will need $3 trillion, which is like 2% of the overall amount of investment. But still, this $2 trillion is a lot of money for the region. So therefore, our main, as I said before, our main concern is how we're able to bring in the private sector to fund this, to pay for this bill. And when you talk to the private sector, the main reason, and you ask them why it is that you are not funding this, the main reason is risk. They perceive that funding these activities, it has a profile, a risk-return profile, which is suboptimal for them. I am talking on the overall, on the aggregate. Therefore, the responsibility of the public sector, and one of the things that we as IDB are engaged in doing, is to make sure that this sort of collection of projects is de-risked. That is, the word de-risking means to reduce the risk, but also can mean to increase the return. So we have to change the risk profile, the risk return profile of these investments in order for the private sector to undertake it. There are many techniques that could be used. There is subsidized lending, grant, blending, guarantees. We are engaged lately in a lot of guaranteeing bonds, which are green bonds, which are social bonds, which are blue bonds, in order for the countries to have resources to finance their climate fight. And also there are other instruments that can be used, but mostly it has to do, as I was saying before, about risk. So that means that it's very important to have well-functioning capital markets, because as you know, capital markets are markets to trade and to share risk among different actors. And it is very important that public sector gets involved, not only as players of capital markets, but also as enablers of these capital markets, and setting the rules in such a way that these capital markets would lead the private sector, will be conducive for the private sector to invest in climate activities. So I think that I have already spoken quite a bit, so I'm gonna stop here, and I'll be, glad to answer any questions related to this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Juan Antonio. Now I'll hand it over to Cesar.
Firstly, I would like to thank very much Sergio, the FHC Foundation, my fellow panelists. It's a pleasure to be here today. And I would like to start with first saying that I would like to associate myself with Ambassador Beatrice's remarks. I think that climate change is one of the greatest challenges of our age, and perhaps also one of the greatest opportunities humankind has ever had to build a better future. Now is the moment for collective action and team spirit. It's crucial that we deliver a step change in infrastructure financing, and in particular in financing the transition to a greener, more resilient economy. And I think I'll give you a bit of our history here at B3. So we've been leading the way in sustainability for over 20 years, going back to 2000 when we created the Novo Mercado listed segment, the new market listing segment, which is an stringent one, recognized worldwide. And then in 2005, we launched our corporate sustainability index, known as EASY B3, and also we joined the United Nations Global Compact. In 2009, we started to disclose our emissions through CDP. 2011, we became carbon neutral. 2012, we were founding members of the Sustainable Stock Exchange Initiative. 2014, we joined the World Federation of Exchange. And 2017, we committed to women's empowerment principles. 2020, we published our annual report in line with GRI, CDP, SASB, and Sustainable Development Goals. And last year, 2021, September 2021, we issued our sustainability-linked bond with social targets. Additionally, we are also recognized by Great Place to Work as one of the best workplaces, especially for women and individuals with disabilities. And also top employers recognized B3 as one of the best HR systems, women on board certified as well. So we've been doing a lot of work over the years. Our strategy includes 3 cornerstones. The first one is to adopt ESG best practice. So we have systems and procedures in place to monitor our performance, for instance, emissions, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, but also human capital development. We have a program to hire, develop, and retain talents here at B3. And the second cornerstone is to promote ESG best practice in the market. We have, for instance, B3 Education is our education hub with online course free of charge on sustainability, on investments. And I am happy to say that ESG is one of the keywords that stop the search. A lot of our audience, our viewers, they look for ESG now. And also we have B3 Social, with investments across the country mainly on education and health, but not only. So you can find additional details on our website. We have our report. You can find our report, annual report, and B3 Social report. And the third cornerstone is to develop products and services. So for instance, we have here at B3 in total 70 indices, out of which 8 are ESG related. Our corporate sustainability index, I mentioned already, our ICO2, carbon efficient, 4 related to governance, and 1 in partnership with S&P, and 1 in partnership with Great Place to Work. So, and we are now working on diversity index as well. And also, I think there are a few opportunities related to data. So when you look at emissions, for instance, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, scope 3 is very significant for many organizations. It could be over 6% of their emissions. The supply chain could be over 6% of their emissions. That could have a significant impact on the effects on the environment worldwide, right? So to have access to that data is crucial in order to allow companies to plan for the future. So they need to understand the emissions, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. They need to get a deeper understanding of their operations, and then with that information be able to plan and put in place a transition plan and set goals that would be aligned with the Paris Agreement, for instance. So I think in terms of ESG data analytics, there is a huge opportunity. We also here at B3, we have a registry where we have bonds, for instance, green bonds, social bonds, sustainability bonds. We also have a success story when it comes to seus, right? Which is, I think it's a first system in Brazil would resemble carbon markets, and that brings me to my next point, which is carbon markets could be another important opportunity for Brazil. Brazil could be one of the largest suppliers of carbon credits, maybe the largest one in the future, and that could contribute to that transition. Of course, the goal is to reduce emissions as much as we can, but carbon markets could help the hard to abate sectors, could help the transition, to fast track the transition, and could be a significant opportunity to communities to increase quality of life, to increase income, and other co-benefits. So I think I'll stop here, Sergio, and then if there are any questions, I'm more than happy to answer those questions. Thank you.
Very good, Cesar. Thank you so much. Paula, your turn.
Thank you, Sergio. First of all, I would like to thank you, Sergio, and the Fundação Fernando Henrique Cardoso, and all the team involved in the preparation of this webinar. Also, my fellow panelists and Ambassador Kirsch for their words, very inspiring words. Well, I would like to first start focusing on what Luxembourg Stock Exchange is doing to help mobilize the money which is needed, as Juan Antonio mentioned, to fight against climate change. So basically, in 2016, we realized that green finance would be a topic to be on the hot agenda, internationally speaking, immediately after the signature of the Paris Agreement in 2015. And so we were the first stock exchange to create a dedicated segment to bring visibility to all these financial instruments as green bonds, social bonds, sustainable bonds, which are key instruments to mobilize investment into green social projects. So basically, we created this segment, the Luxembourg Green Exchange, which at that time was much focused on green bonds, but since then had enlarged the scope, embracing social bonds, sustainable bonds and funds as well, to bring actually visibility to these securities. Of course, that we today are overwhelmed with news about greenwashing, and this is very important for us. So since the beginning, we actually set the standards very high in terms of the reporting obligations that issuers of green, social, sustainable bonds had to provide to the market. So basically, we have very strict criteria in terms of the admission of these bonds into our markets. Issuers have to provide ex ante and ex post reports in terms of the way they are using the proceeds, the way they are allocating the proceeds of the bonds. So this is very important for us, and all these requirements are completely aligned with the international standards recognized internationally as the ICMA, so the International Capital Markets Association, and the CBI, the Climate Bond Initiative standards and principles. So this platform for us is key to provide visibility for issuers and investors on these instruments. The second topic I would like to mention is data. So basically, data is the most important part of all these discussions. So asset managers, issuers, insurance companies, they need data. And the data currently is not structured, is not comparable, which means that it's very difficult actually to navigate into this process of reporting, disclosures, analyzing data, comparing data. So we also launched an initiative, which I strongly believe it's a very useful tool for market participants, which is the LGX Data Hub, which collects actually data from the fixed income segment, which actually allow asset managers to meet their regulatory obligations and have access to structured data. So this is actually a very powerful tool that we have launched, and we are, of course, improving, but it's important for the market. The third element is education, literacy. It's important actually for market participants, sophisticated, not so sophisticated participants, to know what we are talking about when we are talking about sustainable finance, green finance. What are the instruments, the vehicles that are available into the market, disclosures, obligations, transparency requirements. And so since 2020, we launched the LGX Academy with some standard courses, but also tailor-made courses depending on the needs of clients, to provide actually very detailed courses and trainings from a market practitioner, because of course there are lots of academic courses, but we try actually to bring to the market a practical view of capital markets and sustainable finance. The fourth element that I would like to bring to your attention is that well, we are talking about green finance, but it's we should see it in a more broader way. And very recently, we started also to bring more visibility to gender-focused bonds. So this is actually a quite innovative instrument, which for us is key to advance on sustainable finance discussions. So more and more we are observing that countries, states or corporates are actually focused on advancing the discussion about gender equality, gender diversity, and financing specific projects, allocating actually money regarding these kind of projects. And so at the LGX, we are actually tagging these bonds so that they can have more visibility to investors. I would stop here and happy to provide more information and respond to some questions.
I'll turn this into a conversation now. And now my first question would go to Juan Antonio. And it's a twofold question. One is, what is the level, the present level of investment in emission reducing technologies and changes? And how much do we have to increase this the current level of investment in decarbonization? The second, just to give you a ballpark number. The second is, can you elaborate a little bit more on what are, in your view, the most effective instruments available to the IDB in order to leverage the private sector potential in contributing to reduce emissions?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Excellent questions. First one is difficult to give an exact answer because of the data problem that Madame Pereira just mentioned. But the agreement is that we are between 30 and 40% level of what it should be needed. Okay, so per year. So that means that every year that goes by to this 125 trillions, we have to add 70% of the previous year gap. Okay, so this figure of 125 trillion that I mentioned at the beginning keeps growing year after year because of the gap that takes place the years previous to that. The estimation of the possible participation of the private sector is that it could reach up to 70% of the overall amount. However, we have to understand that when we make these calculations, there is a lot of also greenwashing. This green bond business is very dangerous because it is an easy escape for many to actually greenwash their investments. So we have, as IDB, created this what we call the green bond transparency platform that operates only in Latin America, because we're a bank which is focused on the region. And in this platform, as of today, we have an 80% market quota. That is that 80% of the issues are being listed there, and people can tell by the information which is reported on this platform whether these issues are proper or are not so kosher in terms of the climate parameters. The ADB as bank, we're a bank. We lend some $15 billion per year. Out of this, 50% of this goes to the green climate, because we have also to deal with social. We have been very active in the pandemics. We are also in housing, in many areas, but focusing on the climate funding, we do 5 billion. And out of this 5 billion, basically, what we are trying to do is to use guarantees rather than loans, and guaranteeing issues of bonds that countries place on the market. And with these placements, they fund their climate investment activities. So that's the basic scheme. And this is very new, and the market has to learn how to deal with guarantees. But to give you an example, for Ecuador, we had 3 years ago, we issued a bond with a guarantee of 80%. And now we are issuing at levels of 40%, which is a large increase in the leverage capacity of our balance as a bank. Okay, so for each dollar that we have in our balance, before we used to lend $1, now we can lend $2. So we have increased by twice our impact in the green space. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan Antonio. For you, Sarah, the question comes from the public, from my friend Eduardo Viola. By the way, let me recognize publicly the importance of the Consul General of Luxembourg, Ian Eichenbaum here, who is with us today in promoting this seminar. The original idea of this dates back to like 2 years ago, and Ian was involved from the very beginning. Thank you so much, Ian. But the question from Eduardo Viola is, in a nutshell, how important it is to have a regulated credit carbon market in Brazil. Not only the embryo that we have here, the volunteer market, but really a regulated, so to speak, official market to carbon credits in Brazil. And what are the obstacles ahead?
Right. Excellent question. Thank you very much. And I would like to start first with the voluntary carbon market. So we are members of the Brazilian task force for the voluntary carbon markets, together with McKinsey as knowledge partner and other companies, to try and understand the bottlenecks here in Brazil, right? So we already have a voluntary carbon market here in Brazil, which is working. But I think compared to the potential of the country, we could do a lot more, right? There's a lot of work to do in terms of scaling up that market. And then you have, I think, a few bottlenecks. You could look at projects. So we need more projects, standards, financing, project finance, and you could look at bonds, green bonds, for instance, and a few other bottlenecks, right? But there is huge potential. There is a huge natural capital here in Brazil, and also human capital. So that could be explored to increase, to protect our biodiversity, forests, but also to increase productivity. I always get that question if sustainability and profitability are opposed, and I don't think so. I think sustainability is critical and it's core when you look at long-term performance, right? And compliance markets. So I tend to believe that voluntary carbon markets and compliance markets should work in tandem, right? They should support each other, and it's important to work together with different stakeholders to find the right balance, given if you have a local framework to understand and what sort of definitions we need to have in a given country, in that case, Brazil, right? To make sure that we have a vibrant voluntary carbon market together with an efficient compliance market, right? So I think that would be one of the challenges, but also opportunities to develop a robust legal framework for that market that, of course, look at the economics of the country, but also takes into account a voluntary carbon market that's already working. So if you could find a way to scale up those projects and to increase the quality of life of many communities across the country, that could be a starting point.
Good. With Paula's permission, let me explore a little bit more the interaction between as you call it, the compliance carbon credit market and the volunteer one. What can go wrong? I mean, in trying to establish, is there a danger that you might kill the voluntary market in trying to establish the compliance, the regulated one? Is it how you make it a positive sum game and not a zero sum game?
Yeah. Is it for me again, right?
Oh yeah.
The question. Yeah. Okay. All right. So no. I think we need to be careful and developing those frameworks and regulations and legislation, not to create, I would say, obstacles for a market that's already working, right? So there are recognized standards worldwide, right, for the voluntary carbon market. I think it would be wise if we take that into account first. So there's also this discussion around Article 6, right? And how can we, as human beings, work together to deliver on those goals, right? To put together a plan that would work for all. So I think it would be wise to take that into account as well, right? And then try to develop a framework for compliance markets that would, as you said, not try to slow down the voluntary carbon market, but the other way around, right? So if we have a voluntary carbon market that would actually push forward the new projects and push forward high integrity carbon credits, I think that could be, I think, a nice ideas to consider, right? When you're developing a compliance market, you need, I think, it's advisable to take into account and to understand what is already working and working well, right? Once you understand that, how can we support those initiatives and then try to devise a plan, right? So I think that would be initial considerations here.
All right, Paula. Now your take pretty much on the same subject matter, because you are immersed in a mature market, very regulated, that operates under the mechanism of cap and trade. How important it is to the development of the green finance from your perspective, operating within the framework of a cap and trade market?
Yeah. So on carbon markets, actually, we have in Europe the mandatory carbon market regime, which is doing appropriately, and we have also the voluntary carbon market. We need actually to explore more the potentiality of market operators, stock exchanges, into these markets, so that we can actually advance more. And I think actually stock exchanges as B3, Luxembourg Stock Exchange, we can actually explore jointly efforts to scale up these markets. However, in regulatory frameworks play a role in mitigating the green washing aspects that Juan Antonio was mentioning. And for example, for the green bond space, Europe is actually advancing on this topic. In 2021, as a recommendation of the high-level expert group on sustainable finance, which was set up by the European Commission, there was a proposal which is now being discussed at the EU level of regulation to frame what we will have as a EU green bond standard. And this standard is actually it has a very strict criteria in terms of the information that issuers need to prepare and need to disclose before actually issuing the bond and after issuing the bond. So basically the issuers need to prepare allocation reports, impact reports. These reports need to be verified by third-party independent providers. These providers need to be registered and supervised by ESMA. ESMA is the European Securities Market Authority, so the entity at the European level, which is in charge of supervising capital markets in Europe. And so this standard, for an issuer to use this standard, it has actually to comply with very high level standards. It's as Europe used to say, it's the gold standard, actually the maximum level of requirements, precisely to avoid these greenwashing behaviors in the market and protect the market, to give confidence to the market that investors are really putting their money into projects that can actually have a positive impact into climate and environment.
Thank you so much, Paula. You have, in a way, I guess, answered the question asked by Tatiana Silva and Hamid, is how whether there are mechanisms or not. Of course, the mechanisms are being developed to avoid investing in companies and initiatives that are doing greenwashing.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Just to complement what I actually I was saying, what I provide to you was just an example of one regulatory initiative that was taken at the level of the European Union, but there are several initiatives, regulatory legal initiatives being discussed today. I can give you two other examples. The first is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which precisely intend to oblige companies to increase their level of reporting in terms of non-financial information. So this information today is almost voluntary, or it is not actually very structured. So once this the directive is adopted and then transposed into member states, companies need actually to provide additional information to the markets in terms of their non-financial initiatives and investments. And more recently,
very shortly, Paula, because Cesar has raised his hand.
Okay, no, please go ahead, Cesar.
No, Paula, sorry, Paula, I want to congratulate you and the Luxembourg Stock Exchange for the brilliant work that you've been doing. And I think you brought an important point, and it applies, I think, to the carbon market as well. So we look at high integrity carbon credits, that's crucial, right? And just to show the importance, I think the numbers I have is that carbon markets worldwide are currently roughly worth $851 billion, right? That number will change now by the end of the year, but just to give you a feel for the size, I think the European ETS is something close to $700 billion, and the voluntary carbon market is now at $2 billion. It's smaller, but it's that it has doubled twice over the last 2 years, right? So it can play an important role in the future, but high integrity carbon offsets are crucial. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I, with Paulo's permission, let me turn now to Juan Antonio. Juan Antonio, as the head, as one of the heads of the IDB, you are in a privileged position to observe the landscape in this regard in Latin America. How do you see the development of regulated carbon markets in Latin America in general? And let me put you in a not so soft spot. I would like to hear your assessment about Brazil in this regard.
Well, thanks for the question. This is a difficult, as you said, this is a difficult question because you are always in a position of not trying to avoid to hurt feelings. And in this case, I think that I don't really care much about that because we do have such an important task ahead of us that needs to be talked very clearly. I think that there is one important thing that countries need to finalize, and that is that so-called the long-term strategy of investments. Each one of the countries in the region needs to sit down and write up a list of investments that need to be made in that particular country and cost that list and come up with a figure, and then we can help to figure out a strategy to fund this. Within that strategy, carbon credits play a very important role because carbon credits will be generated by those investments. And by placing and using appropriately these carbon credits, the cost of these investments can be decreased substantially, okay? So it is an interplay. But for these carbon credits that have some value, they have to be recognized in the international market as such. And that is the tricky part. So countries have to make sure that they develop regulated markets, not voluntary markets. Voluntary markets are very well, are very good starters, but they need to end up becoming regulated markets for these carbon credits to realize its full value, and for these carbon credits to be meaningful tools to fund this long-term strategy that will bring the country into a net zero position by 2050. Okay.
So if you were right, Brazil is lagging behind. Am I right or am I wrong?
As of today, Brazil is
today.
ahead in terms of voluntary markets. Okay, but it needs to move in a decisive manner into regulated markets, because otherwise you are, as a country, Brazil is missing opportunities to fully realize the value of these carbon credits that are being generated in the private markets, in the voluntary markets, I'm sorry.
Good.
Okay.
I was told that Cesar would have to leave this conversation no later than 5 to noon, and so I think you ran out of time, Cesar. Unless you want to miss your next meeting, you were more than welcome to stay.
Sergio, it would be a pleasure, but unfortunately I have a hard stop. So I would like to thank you again, to thank Ambassador Beatriz, Paula, and Juan. It was very productive, and I wish you all a nice conversation. I will watch you afterwards on YouTube, and have a nice day, and have a nice panel discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful participation. Well, now that we are just just the two of you. I would like to allow you to present your final remarks, and then we close in about 5 minutes. So you have 3 minutes each, and I'll be flexible, and we close in 6 minutes. Do we have a deal?
Absolutely.
All right, Paula, since Juan was the last to speak, it's your turn now.
Perfect. I would actually like to finalize just with one remark, but a very strong remark. It's the need, when we talk about sustainable finance, it's the need to agree on what do we mean by green. This is something actually that it's not yet agreed on an international basis. There are a huge efforts from different players, different institutions in the market. And for me, this is a key topic that needs to be addressed. The European Commission took the lead with the taxonomy regulation, which actually identifies activities that are considered sustainable, with a huge list of these activities and screening criteria. But this is actually a very European tool. We need actually to expand this tool to other countries, to other jurisdictions, to other markets, because capital markets are international by nature. Green bonds are also, carbon markets are international by nature. So we need actually to agree on these fundamental concepts so that we can actually speak the same language to address a global issue as climate change and other topics related to climate. So biodiversity, for example. So for me, this is a key topic that should be addressed internationally.
Paula, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. Before I hand it over to Juan, let me just correct one piece of information. I said that Ian Eichenbaum is the General Consul of Luxembourg in São Paulo. Actually, he is the Honorary Consul of Luxembourg in São Paulo. So having said that, Juan, one more question from Eduardo Viola. Y esta la voy a hacer en español para que nadie nos pueda entender. Porque nuestro amigo Eduardo Viola quiere que tú hagas un ranking de los países de América Latina en términos de qué tan avanzados están en regular los mercados de carbono. Muy amigo nuestro, Viola, querido.
Yeah, no, but I think that this is very difficult to do because unfortunately, it's a multi-dimensional, score system that you should place. And whenever you have a multi-dimensional, you don't have an order, as geometrically speaking, unless you have an aggregator. But we don't do that. So, but I'm just gonna tell you something. I mean, this is a very serious business, to me and to us. It's, I think, the most serious business, because if you don't build a road, it has an effect on productivity, and it has an effect on the well-being of people and so forth. But if you do not invest in climate change, it has a negative effect. For each dollar that you don't invest, it's like $10 that you are going to be losing in this period of time, and eventually you will lose it all. Okay. So yesterday, for example, we my division gave a loan to Argentina for $500 million to take a series of measures that, by taking these measures, we can more or less calculate that they have reached a point in which their GDP will not fall by 5%. So that is a very important investment. Invest 500 million in your GDP, and you will avoid a decrease of 5% in your GDP. That is the type of calculations that countries need to make in order to see that this is a very, very serious business. And I think that with this, I think that is the most important message that I can convey today, what I would like to convey, that this is the most important business that we have in front of us. And I thank you very much for having the opportunity to organize this, this venue in which we can express our opinions. And I hope that everybody else will live here with this on their minds, that this is #1 business of humanity as of today. Thank you very much.
Juan Antonio, mil gracias. I think the two of you have made two powerful final remarks consistent to each other. So it's been a pleasure to moderate this debate, and be sure we're gonna do others in the future, and hopefully in the near future. Beatriz, thank you so much for your support from the embassy. Thank you once again, Paula. Thank you, Juan. Obrigado a todos e todas que nos assistiram até aqui. Paula fala um excelente inglês, mas é uma native speaker de português, nascida em Portugal. Você é de Lisboa ou você...
De Lisboa, de Lisboa.
É alfacinha, pá.
Alfacinha.
Alfacinha.
Nascida e criada em Lisboa.
Nascida e criada. Isto é uma maravilha. Então, beijos e abraços a todos.
Muito
Obrigada.
obrigado.
Foi um
Tchau.
prazer.
Bom dia.